We actually do not have a visual for this, a PowerPoint. We had it, and we had a technology issue, and the whole thing fell apart on us, which seems to be a curse of this room, because that's happened to me before in panels in the past or other series. We get into this room, and all the technology just fails. So we have no PowerPoint, but that's okay. I'm essentially going to start off with a brief history of the series, and then we're going to go into some discussion. So I have some prizes to give out, which I'll talk about in a second. But a big thing happened this year that is going to change the tone of this panel as compared to last year. So obviously last year we were able to give a recap of the series, and it was fairly linear. But since then, new things have come out, namely Three Houses, which I'm sure everybody in the room has played, right? So that game has had a huge impact on the community and the popularity of the franchise, and we'll get to it. But the other thing that happened is the Nintendo has pretty much officially canned the 3DS, so the 3DS is no more. So what I wanted to do, I had this opportunity just kind of fall in my lap, where I have the opportunity to kind of spread the love for the 3DS and some of the great JRPGs that were on the system. And so I have some high-quality JRPGs on the 3DS I'm going to be giving out as prizes. None of them are Fire Emblem, but maybe it'll give you guys who only play Fire Emblem on the 3DS an opportunity to experience some different series. I also have as a prize this wonderful hardback Fire Emblem Awakening art book that is also a great cosplay reference if you've never flipped through it before. How we're going to be giving out prizes is at the end of the lecture piece of it, you guys are going to come up and form a linear line right in front of the projector there and ask a question. So it can be, what's your opinion on this? How do you feel about this? Whatever question you have on the top of your head. And you're going to be entered in for a drawing for a prize. So you'll give us your name, we'll write your name on a ticket, the ticket will go in the chalice, we'll pull it out, and we will read off your name and give you a prize. So the more engaged you are and asking questions, the better chance you are of getting a prize. Make sense? All right, so I'm going to go ahead and go over a brief history of the series really quick. So Fire Emblem always was kind of late to the game for each respective console it was released on. So the first game in the series, Shadow Dragon and Warriors of Light, was released in 1990 for the Famicom, and the whole concept behind it was, let's try to take we had, of course, Intelligent Systems, which is a derivative of Nintendo, who made the Wars series, like Famicom Wars, and they were like, there's this really popular phenomenon right now with these JRPGs like Dragon Quest, so what if we were to take the units you played as with Famicom Wars and give them a personality and a backstory? What a concept! And so that's what we got with Fire Emblem. You had all these diverse characters that had an actual backstory, but it still played out like one of those strategy games that Intelligent Systems was known for at the time. This is when we were first introduced, of course, to the continent of Arcanaya and our hero King Marth, who does not wear pants in this entry, but maybe he'll improve on it later on. In 1992, we got the second Fire Emblem game, Gaiden, which Gaiden was for a while considered the black sheep of the series because it had a lot of really different design elements compared to its predecessor, which seemed to be a common trend with like NES era sequels when you think about like Zelda 2 and Castlevania 2. But if you ever played it, you'd be thinking to yourself, why can an archer attack a melee unit from one space away? How come weapons don't break? Why does magic cost HP to cast? Like stupid stuff like that. And there was the two branching paths that split off. So Gaiden, again, introduced a lot of bold new decisions to the series, but it didn't really have the best reception. It had a very controversial reception from fans. But it was given a remake. And when it was given that remake, they took a lot of those design concepts and really fleshed them out. And it resulted in my opinion, one of the best games in the series. Who here has played the original Gaiden? Okay, a few people. Gaiden also introduced the villager class for the first time, which is the first time in the series you could retrain your units into different classes and essentially have a malleable team you could make as you wanted. But by 1992, Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest were already on their 5th entry. So like I said, they were a little bit late to the party as far as that goes. And the Lancaster series, for those of you that have played that, also had class changing before Gaiden came out. So again, not a hugely impactful decision there. In 1994, we got Mystery of the Emblem, and now you realize that the title of this panel is a pun. Mystery of the Emblem was a pseudo remake and sequel to the original game, where you had two different, basically book 1 and book 2 of Mystery of the Emblem, where book 1 was the retelling of the first Arcanaya story, and book 2 was the continuation. And that was the first Super Famicom game, and again, is held in high regard. Martha decided to wear pants this time, so we appreciate that. So in 1996, we got in what is widely considered one of the best games in the series, Genealogy: The Holy War. Who's played this one? Hey, quite a few people have. So I actually have a untranslated Super Famicom cart of it, so my attempts at playing it have not been very successful. It is also a very challenging game. The one thing that really stuck out about Genealogy is that there has not been a Fire Emblem game before or since that had battles on the scale of what Genealogy had. You had big open maps with dozens of enemies, and the enemies would actually use formations, like barricades and blockades, to try to prevent your units from advancing. And so some of those battles could be very, very long and tedious, but it made for a very engaging experience. Genealogy also had a very dark and mature story. You guys remember all the localization controversy around Fates? Yeah, Genealogy would have never been localized in its original context with the kind of controversial things that happened in that story. Genealogy was also the first game in the series to introduce the weapon triangle, which the series is famous for, where swords beat axes, axes beat spears, and spears beat swords. Believe it or not, there's a YouTuber who specializes in historical sword fighting and things like that, and he actually was asked the question, how scientific is the weapon triangle? Turns out it's not. And basically the consensus is of, if you had something like a halberd, for instance, that had a heavy head on it and still had the reach of a spear, you could beat all three of those weapons. So, but it makes sense for gameplay purposes. Swords are supposed to be more swift than an axe, so they can get around it. An axe is supposed to be able to cut off a spearhead, and a spear is supposed to have longer reach than a sword, so it makes sense. And there's also a soft magic weapon triangle as well that varies between games. Genealogy was also the first game to introduce once you maxed out supports, those characters would have children. So a mechanic that was much beloved by fans of Awakening, I'm sure, was introduced initially in that game. So what would happen is, if you paired up your units correctly and you went to the time skip, you would then have their children characters. If you failed to do that, you would have replacement characters that the game would just give you anyway, due to things that happen in the story. And funny enough, Sigurd, the Lord of Genealogy, was actually originally supposed to appear alongside Marth in Smash Bros. Melee until Roy came along. And the reason being is that they were actually trying to promote Binding Blade when they added him into the game. So Smash Bros. Melee was released before Binding Blade featuring Roy. So much to the confusion of the English audience, I'm sure, that had no clue what game he was from, because we never got Binding Blade localized, but we'll get to that. Let's see. So in 1999, we got Thracia 776, which is another highly acclaimed game in the series. What system do you think Thracia was released for? The Super Famicom in 1999. So again, we weren't in any hurry to release a Fire Emblem 64 or anything like that, evidently. There was also a Fire Emblem game that I can't remember the name of, that was released as it was a weird thing they had in Japan, where it was almost back in the day, the equivalent of a digital download, where you would log into a certain TV channel and you were able to play this basic version of this Fire Emblem game. It was kind of simple, but that was one of the ways in which it was distributed. Thracia is known as the game that actually sold the poorest. It only sold about 200,000 copies, and thus demands a pretty high price tag. But it's also a very critically acclaimed game because it introduced a lot of the mechanics that we know today, such as the Constitution stat, which you could do some weird stuff in that game with the con stat. So that stat would actually factor into your ability to capture enemies. And you would use the rescue command, which some of you should know from the later games, to deal damage to an enemy. And if it dealt enough damage, you would capture them. What you could do with them after that, I have no idea. But it seems like an awesome mechanic to have in there. It was also the first game that introduced alternate win conditions. So prior to this, all of the games only had rout the enemy or defeat the boss. So Thracia was the first game to introduce alternate win conditions such as seize the objective or defend chapters, which we all love so much, right? Defend chapters are the best. Let's see. After Thracia, the original writer for, the director for Fire Emblem, Shozo Kaga, left the studio, and he went off to go make his own game, which apparently didn't do very well. So he made a game that he's like, I'm literally just gonna make Fire Emblem again, but on the PlayStation. It was a game called Tear Ring Saga. Has anybody played that in this room? Wow, okay, so the last year's panel asked that nobody had played it. Do you own a physical copy of it or is it emulated?
It's emulated.
Okay. So that makes sense. And it had a sequel on the PS2 called Berwick Saga. Beautiful looking game with those like Castlevania Symphony of the Night style like sprites. But he encountered a lot of controversy for that because I think one of the working names for it, or like one of the names it was released in a different country, was like Emblem Saga, and they were like, yeah, no, you're not allowed to do that. So, thank you for joining us, Dimitri.
Okay.
All right. So we skipped over the N64. Again, there's rumors around a Fire Emblem 64 game that was in development, and a lot of the assets that were supposedly going to be for that are the things that ended up becoming Path of Radiance. But we did not get a Fire Emblem 64. So the next game in the series wouldn't be until 2002 with Binding Blade on the Game Boy Advance. So Binding Blade, again, has a pretty good reception from the fan base, but some people are actually pretty critical of it for a couple of reasons, and I'll tell you why. So Binding Blade has it scaled down the battles significantly from what we were used to from like Thracia and Genealogy with the large scale battles. It went for a much more smaller encounter size, which kind of became the standard from the series after that. And it just felt a lot more simple in terms of gameplay than what the fans had been used to at that point. And the story, without the greater context of its prequel established, seemed very simple. It seemed like kind of a rehash of the original game of Shadow Dragon, so people weren't all impressed with it. But it did introduce our boy over there, Roy, and is a game that, again, most people have demanded so much here in the West that there's a lot of companies that do reproduction carts of a localized ROM, if you guys are interested in playing it, but I don't necessarily advocate for any kind of unofficial release or anything. So, in 2003, we got the first English Fire Emblem game, which is probably my favorite game in the series. Who here's played Blazing Sword? Hey, that's what I'm looking for. So, this game I love to pieces because not only did I find the gameplay engaging to where, like, it's challenging, don't get me wrong, but I never felt totally overwhelmed where I couldn't get myself out of a situation, because even though I was like low on units, I could still find a way to get through by just resetting enough times and figuring out an optimal strategy. And that is like peak strategy game gameplay right there, where you realize that every decision you made leading up until the end was important, and when you see that mission complete thing, you're just like, whoo, I did it. So that is like peak strategy game gameplay, and I love it. I also love the story because of how it does tie into Binding Blade, but it does it more subtly than you would think for an on-the-nose prequel, because let's face it, prequels rarely work. There's very few prequels out there that are good, but Blazing Sword, the way that it ties into Binding Blade is brilliant, if you ask me, because there's a particular chapter which I'm not going to give full context to if you haven't played it, but there's a certain villain character from Binding Blade that appears, and you see the events happening in real time, and you're just like, God, I wish there was something I could do to change this, and it's agonizing if you know like the greater context. Of course, that was all lost on the American audience because we didn't have Binding Blade. All right. So in around the time of 2005, we had 2 Fire Emblem games that were announced. So Path of Radiance was announced first, but Sacred Stones was released first for whatever reason. So they decided to squeeze in Sacred Stones within that small release window before Path of Radiance. Who here's played Sacred Stones? Most people, yeah. So Sacred Stones, I feel like, has the reputation for being a game in the series that is pretty much untouchable. And that's pretty much the consensus of the fan base, is that Sacred Stones is like one of the best games in the series. And so it actually is more of a throwback to Gaiden. and it replicates a lot of the design decisions they made back then, such as the branching paths. You fight like non-human enemies, like giant spiders that are disgusting and horrifying, and you have like guided chapters, which are little side chapters you can go on, little fighting random battles on the map. So again, not easy to find these days, but a great game in the series. And it shows how those design decisions that were made with Gaiden can be implemented in a way that actually works. So then in 2005, we got Path of Radiance on the GameCube, which, as I said, is ridiculously expensive. Who here's played Path of Radiance? Most people. So this introduced. Well, I should mention that most of the games in the series, in terms of storyline and continuity, they did in pairs. So we had the Arcania story, which was more or less a trilogy, if you think about it. If you include Gaiden in there, as like kind of in soft continuity with it. Genealogy and Thracia are in the same continuity. Binding Blade and Blazing Sword, Path of Radiance, Radiant Dawn. Sacred Stones is the only game to not have another game in continuity with it, directly at least. So that's kind of strange why they decided to do that. Maybe one day we'll get something in continuity with Sacred Stones. But Path of Radiance introduced us to the Tellius continent, which is my favorite realm in the Fire Emblem universe, and to me is the most fleshed out of all of them. Although, from what I hear from people that have played Three Houses kind of up there in terms of world building. But I love how there's so much in terms of culture and politics and the inner workings of the realm and how this war is shaping out over the arc from Path of Radiance to Radiant Dawn that I just think is amazing. Like, it's just excellent world building overall, and you really get a sense of like what the characters are fighting for. And in terms of character development too, to actually see, Ike and the Grail mercenaries go through this struggle from the beginning all the way to the end, and everything they go through is like really touching, and I think is just great storytelling overall. My other cosplay from Fire Emblem is Har from Radiant Dawn, and he has a reputation of being an utterly broken character in that game because for some reason in Radiant Dawn, which was released in 2007, they eliminated the weakness to arrows for Wyvern Riders. And the only thing that is super effective against the Wyvern Rider in that game is Thunder Magic, and Thunder Magic is terrible. Like a base Thunder Tome has the same accuracy as a thrown hand axe. So you're not hitting anything with that. So Har just walks up there like, all right, I'm just gonna go straight to the back and just kill the boss and the chapter. So if you guys are ever curious, go look up some of the Fire Emblem speedruns that are out there. The Radiant Dawn speedrun is pretty hilarious because it's basically just Har Emblem all the way through. Featuring the Dawn Brigade briefly. Nobody really cares about them.
It's also an expensive game to find these days.
Yeah. So Radiant Dawn is also expensive, not as much as Path of Radiance, but it goes for around 80 to 90.
I was up there now. I bought mine for 20.
Oh, well then, rub it in, why don't you?
I still have my Nintendo Power to get my Path of Radiance.
Painful. Okay. So after having a brief time on the console platforms, we go back to handheld in 2010 with Shadow Dragon, which is a remake of the original. Who here has played Shadow Dragon? Most people. So I'll be honest, I'm not the biggest fan of this game. I think the art is ugly. I think the in-game sprites are really ugly. And but it is probably the best and most successful way to watch, or to play the original Fire Emblem game. Yeah. Well, I mean, his armor looks pretty legit, and he's wearing pants this time, so there's that.
Also, don't disrespect Pantsless Marth, dude. Come on.
Well, hey, Pantsless Marth appears in the Fire Emblem anime that unfortunately exists, and one of the people that's supposed to be here right now has a physical VHS copy of the Fire Emblem anime. Yes, it exists, and she was going to showcase it for us. But you can watch it on YouTube. It's got a quality English dub, and it was actually the first Fire Emblem anything to be localized. It was localized before the first game was. So that's how we've treated this lovely franchise over the years. All right. So I'm not the biggest fan of Shadow Dragon, but like I said, if you guys can find it, it goes for like $30 to $35 secondhand right now. If you find a copy, pick it up because it is probably the most accessible way that you're going to get to play the original Arcania story. So really can't complain about that. All right. So, pop quiz. Which game do you think is the first game to allow you to play without permanent death? You there with the Crunchyroll lanyard? Yep, you. Yep.
The first one was the one that never came over, the remake of Mystery of the Emblem.
There you go. So it is not Awakening, as a matter of fact. It is another unreleased game. So this is a new Mystery of the Emblem, Heroes of Light and Shadow, which is a remake of Mystery of the Emblem. So they loved Arcanaya so much, they remade it twice. And so this game apparently is really good. It has some of the same art problems as Shadow Dragon because it is, of course, the same engine. And like I said, they love to do the games in pairs. But it is the first game to allow you to play without permanent death. And it demands a very expensive price tag, probably up there with like Genealogy and Path of Radiance, around like $100 to $120 mark, because it was never localized and apparently it did not sell well. Which put the series on shaky ground going into the 3DS era. Now Awakening, which all of you are familiar with for sure, has a reputation for like saving the series. I didn't know that was such a controversial take on it though, because I think it's pretty definitive. The sales figures are there. It sold like what, 10 million copies or something like that. And then, there's other factors that factor into that, like there weren't a lot of other JRPGs on the 3DS at the time. But you can't deny what it did for the series, and if it didn't do that, if it didn't do as well as it did, we may not have all these games we have right now. So love it or hate it, it has done something very impactful for the series, and I personally really enjoyed Awakening. I enjoyed the different direction that the art style took. I really enjoy the gameplay mechanics as well. Believe it or not, my biggest gripe with Awakening is the story. I actually think the story is pretty bare bones. There's nothing ostensibly bad about it, but it seems like another like soft reboot. Like we're just going to retell Shadow Dragon again. So you guys are big Awakening fans. You have anything else to add?
I think for the most part, most people like I've known that played Awakening really remembers like how they remember most of the characters and the story. Because a lot of people cosplay from Awakening and they love most of the characters in that.
I liked giving every child Gale Force.
Yeah.
I had spreadsheets and I went insane for a little bit with like 4 playthroughs. I don't know why I did that to myself, but I apparently had a lot of time to do that.
Right. Yeah, so eugenics is a huge thing in Awakening where like there's all kinds of ways to optimize your children's characters to make them busted, which makes the higher difficulty levels more enjoyable, certainly. But that was, believe it or not, that was actually one of the ways in which our relationship was manifested, was us talking about Awakening. So
the final DLC map is especially on Lunatic.
I haven't played it. Have you played it? The final DLC map?
The one where you fight 5 successive wave of enemies, and the last one is just the first 4 waves simultaneously.
That's stupid.
No.
Well,
right?
So, let's see. And I really enjoy a lot of the support conversations in Awakening, don't get me wrong. They are, some of them are cheesy, but if anything, I didn't think that they were poorly written. So at this point, us as individuals and us as a fan base were super excited for the next game in the series.
Super excited.
And then they really were like, okay, we just had a huge hit. Let's not repeat this formula at all. Let's just throw caution to the wind and try something radically different. And I think that was in hindsight, with what we have now, ended up being a pretty good decision. Because we had Fire Emblem Fates in 2016, which I'm sure most of you have played, show of hands. Yeah, that's what I thought. So let's do individual games. So Birthright, and Conquest, and Revelations. Okay, so a little bit of a mix. I personally played Conquest, but you played almost all of them, right?
I gave up in Revelations.
Same. I married my own cousin, like blood cousin. I'm like, oh.
So our
They
other
stuck that in there. That
Yeah,
was
I like-
dirty.
I'm like,
Our other
oh, she has a
panelists-
dinosaur. I'm like, oh.
Our other panelist who decided not to show up has a huge rant about this, where she says that and of course, I want to make this point very clear before I rant about this, is that the discussion of gee, I wonder what could be improved about Fates, has been done to death. There's no more nuance to be had in that conversation. I really think it's time to move forward, especially because we can look at what that formula gave us with the branching story paths, and we see that formula just perfected in Three Houses. And so, really, there's nothing else to add about what could be done better about Fates. But I understand the. I hated Takumi so much.
You played Conquest.
So,
Of course you did.
yeah, because I had to fight him in the end. But anyway, so like I said, the conversation around Fates has kind of been dragged into the dirt. But I understand where the complaints come from, because you have 3 story routes, which involves you paying 3 separate transactions for 3 separate games, plus DLC to get the true final ending and revelation about the main character. And even then, some people still felt disappointed. But what I will say on the positive side, very good gameplay design decisions in that game. So like going into it, if you always paired up units to go just gang up on the enemy units in Awakening, and then you do that in Fates, and you find out the enemy can do it too, you're like, whoa, wait, I didn't expect this, what do I do now? And there's other things too, like again, watch the Conquest speedrun, it's amazing. And just there's so many little subtleties with the gameplay I think was really well done in the Fates games. And the art style is just beautiful. Like that's pretty hard to debate. And then
Character designs were pretty good
yeah,
too.
character design is
Personality-wise, they kind of faltered, but their appearances were really cool.
I think everybody's universal gripe that is pretty unanimous is just that the story was gutted so much and the writing was not there. And I think that boils down to the support conversations too, where like the conversations in Awakening were like it was like watching somebody's opera or whatever, and then the support conversations in Fates were like watching somebody's cheesy high school play. And it's just in terms of it's just so jokey, and just the comedy was just not good. Luckily, another game in the series improved on comedy dialogue, right? So, I quickly want to go through some of the other games, and I just want to open the floor to Michelle to talk about Three Houses, because I know she's dying to talk about Three Houses.
Not at all.
Fire Emblem Heroes is a thing. And I have a strong disapproval of gacha games. That being said, as a gacha game, Fire Emblem Heroes is not bad. At its core, the gameplay is Fire Emblem, and it has actually done a pretty good job of retroactively introducing a lot of newer fans to older characters, such as myself. And I can't be mad at it, but I just think it is pretty much established that the design sensibilities of gacha games are predatory and should not be rewarded. So I would say, play it if you're curious about some of these older characters. Play it if you want Fire Emblem on the go, but don't spend real money on it. Don't. Yeah.
As a gacha game, it does give off a lot more of the resources for free-to-play players.
Yep.
Not recently though, but
I've gotten almost every character I care about and not had to do anything. Although I got screwed on getting Har, and I'm still mad about that.
You'll be okay.
I'll get him one day. He will come home. And you know what? His art in that is also fantastic, which is giving me like new reference pictures for cosplay.
It's open to a lot of more, I guess, online artists and voice actors, actresses.
Good point as well. Yeah, so a lot of new people got a lot of exposure through that.
Yeah, I like that they use different artists for characters.
Although some of the art is just not consistent. Or Prom sitting over there, he's not drawn particularly well. Yeah. Olivia's okay, not
Long
great.
Q, see, Olivia and Long Q, I think, are drawn by the same artist. I don't know something about it.
I think Arthur looks nasty.
Wow.
I forgot about Arthur.
So who here has played Fire Emblem Warriors? Okay, that's quite a few people. So I am so frustrated when I talk about this game because I am a big Musou fan, and I don't understand why. I think it's because of Sengoku Basara, because I love that series, and so I love the fact that a lot of these intellectual properties get Musou games, but the reception is always the same. Like, we get people that jump in, they're like, hey, I love this franchise that this game is associated with, but they don't like the gameplay because it's just Dynasty Warriors. And people always compare it to Hyrule Warriors as well, like we're gonna put Zelda on some pedestal and worship it. And I just don't think that's a fair assessment So I like Fire Emblem Warriors quite a bit. As a matter of fact, I think it is a good Muso game. I don't think it's a good Fire Emblem game. And actually, the story is basically a carbon copy of Dragon Quest Heroes. If anybody's played that, it's almost the exact same premise. But it works, and I mean, it is fun. There's some gameplay decisions there that I think should be like Muso staples from now on, like the ability to go in the menu and assign tasks for your AI-controlled allies to do. That's awesome, because God forbid your AI allies in a Muso game do anything useful, right? So,
And also the more RPG elements to character building.
yeah, certainly. Yeah, I think there's a lot of design elements in Warriors that should be staples of that genre. But I don't think it's likely that we'll get a Warriors 2, and if we do, it's just going to be a bunch of Three Houses characters.
Hey.
We're not. I'm not going to be in the game.
So, all I really remember about Warriors is Frederick and the horse, and that horse commits. That horse commits with Frederick very hard.
Yeah.
Okay, but you can't tell me
Horse acrobatics.
you can't tell me you wouldn't want to run around as Raphael punching everybody in a Muso game.
That would be pretty fun.
I
would do it.
would.
That would
Yeah.
be amazing.
Because
I
we
would
haven't
be Caspar,
had
though.
we haven't really had brawlers in the Fire Emblem series up until then. Everybody's had to hold a weapon because that's how the
A
series
good
worked.
punchy boy.
I mean, there's Magwell and
So I think that is about
That's
it.
Hello, Three Houses.
Yeah. So all right, let's open up this can of worms. Talk about Three Houses.
So, you haven't gotten to play it because I have the Switch, and I've only made it through Blue Lions and half a Golden Deer. But I know I've already been spoiled for most of it. I'm really excited to play the rest of the game. Do you have anything to say?
I think what they did with the school system, of how they had like the academy and everything, I thought that was a cool thing that they added to it. I know some people in our server wasn't too fond of it too much, but as the game came out, it looks good. I think it's a good way to communicate with members of each house and building friendships with them.
Yeah, it's a good way to get your supports. Okay, so what I liked about Three Houses was that there's a lot of lore, and there's a lot of lore that was kind of snuck in that if you kind of did what I did and was really excited to see the time skip stuff, which I was not spoiled on. I actually waited till the time skip happened to see all the time skip stuff. Thanks for not warning me about Dimitri.
I was spoiled the hell out of time skip Edelgard because I was all about that design. That design is amazing.
I was not spoiled. I was not marrying Dimitri, and then all of a sudden time skip happened and I S-ranked him.
You couldn't tell by the fact that Felix, the person you're cosplaying, literally, he's like, "You wild boar."
Okay, so I recruited Felix in Golden Deer just to marry him. So also, Golden
you
Deer doesn't have any swords people.
You also picked the hardest one because he has the hardest. Because you have to do sword proficient things to get him
So
right.
Felix has everyone all has stat things that you do to recruit them. Felix has nobody shares the same one Felix has. Felix has to be that person. Felix has to be that one. He has to sword in something else. I don't even remember what the other one was.
He's playing hard to get. He's the Tsundere, which
He's
is
the Tsundere.
But
your
he's
type.
easy because he's
The
not
thing is,
out
though,
as a sword
if
wielder.
you play
What are you
if you're playing a second route and you're trying to recruit Felix, it's super easy because all you have to do is just bump your sword and authority.
Oh, I
stat.
put him
It's
I put
already
him
got
B
those.
rank and then I knocked up my sword. Yeah, super easy.
Yeah.
Sylvain was great.
So
I played as a girl. I got Sylvain immediately.
it's still pretty early to tell, but I think the consensus for the most part about Three Houses is that it's pretty good.
It's really good.
Everybody seems to like it. Classic fans and modern fans seem to like it. It did away with some of the modern design elements. I think there are no paired up units anymore, right?
No, can't
there's
pair
no,
up units.
There's
Not
no,
everybody has
there's no
support from each
children.
other.
There's no children anymore. Yeah.
No
And
Triangle doesn't matter.
Oh, there is
that's
no
debatable.
one.
But yeah, so it's kind of so I don't kill me for saying this. It reminds me of Persona 5 in a way, where so we take a couple of the old design elements from the older games and kind of subtly put them in this new game, and just everybody is happy. It seems like. What I'm worried about is that there's going to be another schism because Three Houses is so popular. Yeah, I'm a little worried, but
4 houses.
yeah, 4 houses. But overall, I couldn't be happier with the game's reception because we have the modern fans and the classic fans coming together under one umbrella and appreciating this new game for what a great experience it is. I think the Pokemon fan base is something to learn from this.
And I won a national day.
Yeah. God, if I have to hear that this weekend, oh boy. All right, so we have pretty much wrapped up the lecture portion of it, so I think we need to give out some prizes. So
excited.
you guys can ask literally anything you want, as long as it's not like a dumb meme or something, just because you want to get a prize. But like,
Ask me ship questions. I'm kidding.
do it. So what we have here, you can do it on the back side, so it's just their name. So what I want you to do is form an orderly line at the tripod there, and you're going to ask a question, and then you're going to give us your name and your question, and when you give us your name, we're going to write it down and put it in the Grail from a totally unrelated franchise, and then we're going to draw your names later for prizes. So let's go over what these prizes are. So I mentioned because the 3DS was going away, I secured a bunch of 3DS JRPGs. So obviously I showed off the Awakening art book, everybody saw that. So I have a copy of Bravely Second in Lair.
You have 2 of those, right?
I have 3 of those.
3 of those.
I have a copy, this is probably the best one, a copy of Radiant, oh no, not that one, Dragon Quest VII. Another copy of Bravely Second. A copy of Radiant Historia Perfect Chronology, which is probably the crown jewel of that stack. Another Bravely Second. And a Dragon Quest VIII. So, who here has played a Dragon Quest game? A few of you. So hopefully, I will give one of these to somebody who's never played a Dragon Quest game. And then next year, when I'm inevitably hosting a Dragon Quest panel, we can come to that. I'll give out some Fire Emblem. All right. So, questions. And any of us can answer if it's applicable to.
Ask me ship questions. I'm kidding.
Don't be shy.
Shipping is fun.
Shipping is fun, and I ship lots of things. What doesn't matter.
Fire Emblem actually
Bailey, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So,
I'm like
Bailey is the
FedEx
name.
at this point.
BAILY.
EY.
Hey, Fire Emblem's
Yeah.
the only franchise that managed to keep to make me a straight male actually make BL ships.
There you go.
Too busy to deal with swords.
Look, it's so obvious that they did it to be GRK free.
Question.
Okay, so I have a serious question and then I have a ship question.
Okay.
Just for
Yes.
You only get one roll though. That's okay.
Do you think that the not necessarily New Game Plus mechanics, but the mechanics that you were able to carry over from clearing a first route and then going into a second route in 3 houses were effective, useful, and did you use them?
Yes, and yes.
Totally.
Yes. It makes it so much easier to recruit everyone after I slaughtered them because I didn't recruit them in the first one.
And then how do you pronounce Dimitri and Felix's ship name?
No. I ship it and no.
Yeah.
I don't know who came up with it, but I was like, okay. Their last name's mixed. Like,
Yeah.
why would you do that?
She got a hold of me one day. Was like, they used their last names for the ship, and I was like,
Why did they do that?
that's great. All right, question.
Hello there.
What's your name?
Ephraim.
Okay, Ephraim.
Yeah? Okay, in the GBA titles, what was the least useful unit?
There's only one answer.
Probably one that died immediately on me.
There's only one answer. There's only one answer to this.
Go ahead.
There's always one answer to this. Pegasus Knights.
Hey.
Oh, unit type?
Yeah.
You're gonna hate me for this. I would say thief. I didn't utilize thieves that well in Blazing Sword. I probably could have. I just never had an opportunity to. I know, like, what's his name? Jafar is really good, but like I just
Did you
never.
recruit?
Jafar's an assassin.
Yeah, but it's the same. It's the same unit tree. Yeah, but I never use thieves in Blazing Sword.
By the way, guess what my favorite title is?
Second Son.
Yes.
Lucky guess.
All right.
All right, what's your name?
Lucas. Well,
Lucas,
we'll use
okay.
my name. Yeah. I guess my question is, I feel like you already kind of like touched on this, but how did the first game you played in the series like kind of impact how you got into the series and like your love for it or hate for it, depending on how you feel about it?
Yeah, so I'm actually super glad you asked that because I normally unpack that and I didn't this time. So believe it or not, my first game in the series was Awakening. So
mine was as well.
I actually got in the reverse order, Modern First, then Classic, but I think it was because don't get me wrong, the old games intimidated me. Like the fact that not being able to play without permanent death intimidated me, and then I actually played Blazing Sword, and like I said, it was that gameplay was so engaging, and it was like edge of your seat the whole time, and all the resets from trying to save characters, I was like, this is it, this is my jam, I love this. And then Radiant Dawn as well, where like I went through Radiant Dawn blind with very little resets, because I just kind of knew what I was doing, and I just had a lot. And there's also the fact that you can like import save data from Path of Radiance that helps a lot with that too. But I think because I got into the series that way is why I have the stance on it that I do, because I can see from both sides the appeal of both generations of the series. So, you guys have anything to add, or I don't think either of you have finished a classic game, right?
No. I
Okay.
have not. I'm still working.
We're working on it.
I have no time. I'm sorry.
So-
Same here.
But yeah, great question.
College.
The old games are unforgivingly brutal.
Yeah,
They are.
especially
Even the GBA games are easy.
a small little nugget to go along with that. I don't want to burn the popcorn here, but small little nugget on that. So we know when you go to enter a combat and it shows you the damage roll and it shows you like what the result of that will be. That wasn't implemented until like Binding Blade. So like the older games, you had to guess or do like hard math to find out if your encounter was even going to work. So that's unforgiving.
The SNE ones, the old ones are. I've probably sunk well over 10,000 hours into Fire Emblem.
Mhm.
I've sunk probably 3,000 hours into Awakening because I'm that lunatic that ran Lunatic and then did the DLC. The new anything GBA newer is so much easier than the old. Even Radiant Dawn is.
Yep. I agree. Yeah. Great question, though. Appreciate it.
Hi, my name is William.
Okay.
My question is, so you know how there's the large maps in genealogy, right?
Mhm.
Well, in Three Houses, there's a lot of side missions that reuse a bunch of like basic maps. It kind of gets dry after a little bit. So, do you think it would work if they kind of brought back those massive maps and had like the side missions take
Yes.
place on kind of like different sections on those massive maps?
Yes. Those grinding is so boring.
Yes.
Yeah.
Grinding is so boring in Three Houses.
If I have
It's
to-
the same map, the same enemies.
If I have to see that sand fort one more time, I'm gonna lose
Oh,
my mind.
God, yes.
And
Yeah,
even
so-
some of the paralogs shared the same maps.
Yeah.
I was like, why?
I guess I can agree with that to an extent, but it would have to be designed very well, because again, I hate to make this as an analogy, but we were talking about Muso games earlier.
Right.
You know how Dynasty Warriors 9 was open world?
Yeah.
Don't
that
do
one-
it like that.
Yeah, no,
So
definitely.
yeah, but yeah, I think that's a good point.
All right, cool.
Appreciate it.
Hi, I'm Brendan.
Hey, Brendan.
I don't think you mentioned Shadows of Valencia at all.
Good call out. So I mentioned when I talked about Gaiden that Gaiden had a remake, and that was all I said about it. So let me unpack that a little bit. So Echoes is probably my third favorite game in this series, maybe fourth. It is really, really good.
Yes.
If you guys, again, I'm talking about the 3DS, so like, if you guys have not played Echoes, go to your local GameStop and see if they're clearancing it out, and absolutely buy it. It is a great, I think it's also a good bridge for a modern fan to get into a classic game, because with only a couple of settings changed, that is a classic game. And it is very unforgiving because you're dealing with so few quantity of units. But yeah, Echoes is a fantastic game. So, appreciate it.
They're $40 on Amazon right now.
$40 on Amazon, cool. What's your name?
My name is Annabelle.
Isabel?
Annabelle.
Annabelle, okay.
Close. Okay, so my question is, how did you feel about them recycling characters between Awakening to Fates, and then how did you feel when you didn't see them do it again in Three Houses?
I hated the recycling, and I love the fact that it wasn't recycled. I like characters.
Yeah, so like even though they redrew them in Fates, I did think it brought up more questions than anything else, because I'm like, this seems like such a widely different continuity. I don't know how this even ties in. And I guess they do explain that in Revelations.
It gets into like time warp, timey-wimey,
convoluted,
crazy
yeah.
BS that
And popularity charts.
Now, there are ways to include old characters into newer games that I think works well. So seeing Tiki in Awakening, I thought worked. Seeing the I can't remember their like unit name, but the Paganites from Arcadia in Guided Echoes, I thought was also really cool. But yeah, I was also not a fan of the. Yes, yeah, I was also not a fan of the recycling in from Awakening to Fates though. But their art is still good. Like the redraws are really good. So
I think it was based off popularity charts, honestly.
It was.
Probably,
That's
yeah.
what they were. They were literally fan favorite characters that
There you
got
go.
added back into the
Several, Selena, I married Cordelia, my child. I'm fine with it. But
Yeah. Thank you for your question though.
Radiant Dawn and Path of Radiance did it right. You aged the characters instead of.
Yes. What's your name?
Lydia.
Lydia.
So, my question is, what support group was like one that like touched you the most, like out of all games, or if first being simple Three Houses?
What support conversation?
Yes.
So this is spoiler territory for me because
For
this is
Three Houses?
No, not for Three Houses, for Blazing Sword. So because she said across the whole series, I'll let you do Three Houses when I want to do Blazing Sword. So this is totally biased because I just love these characters, but whatever, it's my opinion. So in Blazing Sword, in like the second to last chapter, if you support Lynn and Hector, the implication is that Lynn like embraces him and says, "I don't want you to die," and he's like, "I won't," and that to me was like really impactful, especially considering what happens in the next game. But we won't go there. So that was like peak character development for me personally, even though it was just a small little moment. But what is your?
one of my Three Houses like the supports I really like that actually develops a character very well is Sylvain and Mercedes.
Yes.
Yeah.
That actually makes Sylvain not look like a tool. Who I still love. He's still one of those characters I'm like, when I first played, I was like, I hate you. Stay away from me. And then I'm like, I love you.
Do that for him. I think like all of his supports just really justify him as a character.
Yeah, but like that one really hit because it really hits on why he's actually a traumatized being.
He's a poor boy.
He's a poor boy.
He needs love, but not the love he gives out.
No.
Yep.
You're right.
Okay, I think I'm trying to figure out when we're going to call this because we're running a little short on time and I need time to give out the prizes. Let's keep rolling. So, what's your question? Or I'm sorry, what's your name?
Kyle. My name's Kyle. My question is, well, I noticed that you missed Tokyo Mirage sessions. I wonder what you thought about that. First off, if you hit Warriors, why'd you not hit this one?
Does it have Fire Emblem in the title? Does it? F-E sharp, yeah.
Yes.
So I will be 100% transparent and tell you what my experience has been with Tokyo Mirage Sessions. I bought it for her like on one of her birthdays or whatever. We sat down and played the opening and never touched it again.
Sorry.
That's been my so actually I really want to play it, and like I was one of those people that when an SMT Fire Emblem crossover was announced, I lost my stuff just off. I was so hyped, and then they gave us this, which honestly, like, again, in terms of like art direction, beautiful looking game. And I think the consensus is that it's pretty good in terms of gameplay too, but yeah, it's not what we wanted.
It's not Shin Megami, and it's not Fire Emblem.
yeah.
It's Persona Idol. I'm like,
Yeah.
It was 2 years delayed, and then I think either it was co-developed between the two teams, and then one of the teams backed out, so the other team had to finish the game.
Yeah,
That's
it
the
wasn't
game
what
felt.
it was not what we
That's
wanted.
what
But
the
yeah,
game
good call.
felt.
I did not mention that.
That's a
You're
good
like talking about it 2 months afterwards.
I'm Caroline, and I wanted to ask, for Blue Lion's route, what was your reaction to the first cutscene after the time skip with Dimitri? Because it broke my heart.
I cried. I cried harder at.
darn it, I'm on the Blue Lines right now.
I cried.
You're gonna
There's a
cry.
reason I married him.
Ready?
I felt bad. I wanted to
Because I've
protect
done
him.
everything
feel about your dad?
Look, I just.
Listen, it was like 4 in the morning. I couldn't sleep. There was tears and no one to comfort me.
I would have told you to go back to bed.
You would have, but I couldn't sleep.
So I guess go ahead and write down Dimitri, right?
Sure. Who was your favorite Fire Emblem villain and why?
Ooh. Again, I'm biased. I'm gonna probably have to go with Nurgle because of the scene with when Eliwood gets Durandal. Y'all, those of you that play it know exactly what I'm talking about. That was just diabolical, and like you have like that painted like CG of him like, aha, I'm the great hero who's gonna slay the dragon. Oh, that didn't go as planned. So yeah, for sure it's Nurgle for me. What about you guys?
I remember a character from Awakening, but I can't remember his name. I know he was with Robin.
Valadar?
I think that's
What do
it.
you use?
I think it was like a spell, like
Yeah,
most of them use magic.
Yeah. Most of the Awakening bad guys were Dimitri.
Can I say Lady Rhea? Is that allowed?
Yes. I didn't know that, but okay.
She's not technically, but she's.
I
pretty
just learned
diabolical.
something, ladies and gentlemen. I didn't know she was a villain.
Organized religion is bad.
Final Fantasy X told us that.
If you didn't know that by now, I can't help you.
Okay, what's your name?
Just write me down as Ash.
Ash, okay.
An ashy boy.
But
A good boy.
okay, so someone else who has played Echoes. It's very hard to find fellow fans of Echoes where I'm from. How do you feel about the gameplay of it?
So it took a while to get into because I did have an issue with how grindy the battles were because you're dealing with large health pools and small damage output, and you would like in Awakening and Fates before that you would have characters just utterly sweep each other out, and like you had just broken units right off the bat in Fates, and so going from Fates to Echoes it's like, oh, 7 damage, oh, 4 damage, okay, and it was just a little hard to get into, but other than that I thought it was fine.
Okay, can I follow up?
Yeah.
Something?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. When Alm got the Royal Blade, was he busted in your playthrough as well?
Yeah. Not as much as I would have thought, but yeah, it definitely helped out a lot.
I totally forgot about the turn wheel as well. Like that never got used. That never got used in my life.
I only use it on the final map. Yeah.
Like, what is this madness?
For
What's
your
the
name?
Well, you can put Willie or something if there's already another one. For Three Houses, what is in your personal opinion, what is the most broken unit?
In Three Houses?
I mean, Hilda's pretty bomb. I haven't been able to go like full crazy. I'm still working.
The MC.
I mean, yeah, the main character is pretty broken. Like, she's sweet. I never played as the guy. Sorry, she's sweeping everything. And I'm
So-
like,
That's kind of what's been going on through mine.
I saw like
Felix is pretty baller. He's like an assassin right now.
I saw somebody actually put together a tier list that I saw recently, and of course this is all subjective, so whatever. But I think Claude was actually on that like S+ tier of being like stupidly broken.
Mine is weak sauce right now. I gotta work on that boy.
Yeah.
My Dimitri was broken.
Mine was too.
Main character has just been
That last
stupid.
battle, I was like, I realized I messed up, and like when Dimitri and Felix got killed, I was like,
Yeah.
screwed.
Yeah.
What's your name?
David.
Okay. What's your question?
Since you've played more classic games, you're probably like the best to answer this, but as Three Houses has like brought in more classic elements, like a lot of genealogy inspired stuff with time skips, do you think it would be great to see the series return to bringing in those classic elements, or since Kaga's doing his own things like Vesteria Saga and so forth, do you think we should kind of leave some of that stuff in the past and keep kind of trying innovative new FE stuff?
Yeah, so I like the direction it's going, but I need to finish Three Houses before I can really make an opinion on that, because here's my problem with Three Houses as a concept right now. There is entirely too much busy work. There is so much little BS that you have to do that's outside of combat that just adds days to the gameplay. And I'm not saying that stuff is boring or not enjoyable or that it doesn't add positive to the experience, but my experience with the classic games has always been chapter to chapter to chapter. But as far as like the things that they did take back from classic games, I'm fine with that. I think they should continue in that direction. And actually, I've said this before in the previous panels, but I really, really, really hope the next game announced is a genealogy remake.
Genealogy in 3.
Yeah, I really hope that's on the chopping block as a genealogy remake.
Changes they'd have to make to keep
I'm
the
saying
T rating that they designated it to be forced to.
Yeah, it's unfortunately going to have to happen. All right, I think we're going to have to cut it off at the guy with the so guy in the green shirt, guy behind you. Yes, you. We're going to have to cut it off there for time. Okay. To give out the prizes because we have like 5 minutes left. So Robin,
hello.
I saw you yesterday. I think?
In the elevator.
In the elevator, yeah. What is your question?
So with the advertising for Fates, they kind of always advertised Conquest and Nora as kind of like the bad guys of like the evil route that everyone wanted, like how some people want to play a Pokemon game as Team Rocket. Mm-hmm. And when I played Conquest, I felt a little upset.
You didn't get that, did you?
By how everything was so not evil and happy.
Right.
Like, I wanted to do some bad stuff, you know? I wanted to be the bad guy.
Like burn villages down?
Yes.
So as you can tell, I've played a lot of JRPGs. No JRPG would play out the way Conquest plays out, ever. If you're playing a JRPG, one of two things is going to happen. You're either going to games that are going to give you the option to be evil like that, and it's going to have consequences for the character, but they're still going to do it willingly, or you're going to go bum rush the evil king. And they never opt to go bum rush the evil king, because like in any other JRPG, yeah, they'd have the entire army of that country with their spears at their back, but your broken main characters would still overcome somehow by, you know, getting the job done. That's what you do in JRPGs. Like that was one of the things I realized very early on about Conquest. Is that it was very much at odds with itself about the story that it was advertising to you. But that being said, I think the gameplay still is untainted by that. But I do agree with that as a criticism of the plot for sure.
But my question with it was, eventually when I got 3 Houses, because I know a lot of fans were vocal about how they didn't like Conquest because they thought it was going to be dark, evil, and it wasn't.
Yeah.
At least one of the, I'm not going to say which route, but one route in 3 Houses I feel like can be somewhat what Conquest should have been.
Sure is.
Oh yeah.
It sure is.
It's my favorite route.
Yeah. Oh no, 3 Houses is dark. Like it is very dark, and I'm all for it because you would think, again, with the audience that they're trying to attract for the series, that they would go with something a little more harmless. Absolutely not. Like 3 Houses is very dark, consistently with character backstories and with plot elements as well. And I'm very happy about that. Thank you for your question. Appreciate it.
Is it
All
dark
right.
or just edgy? It's more edgy than dark.
So what's your name?
Tommy.
Tommy. Okay. What's your question?
So, with Fire Emblem, in the very history of it, it's known for having large sums and swaths of characters, especially in later games. Are there any games where even large casts of them, or even some characters, you just don't care for, you find very boring until the very end?
Yes. Oh, I mean, yeah, well, you can't use Fates always. I'm sure Awakening had a couple that you were just like, I don't really care about. There's a character that his whole stick is that. His name's Kellum. Do you remember Kellum?
No.
That's his whole stick. Forget about him.
I don't think I've ever seen this character before. What does he look like?
The biggest dude. No one sees him.
So I am so bad for him. I don't know that I can relate because I am infinitely curious about the characters that I don't use. For instance, again, my first playthrough of Blazing Sword, as I mentioned, with not using Jafar, was pretty botched. Like I got through it, but I'm gonna play it again very soon, and of course I'm gonna play with her as well.
Yes,
but my thing is like, there are so many characters I either didn't get or didn't utilize well, or they died, and I'm like, I am just infinitely curious about those characters that I didn't use. And then even with like Tellius games that have a very, very large cast, there was nobody that I thought that I wasn't curious about, at least. There were a few characters in Awakening that I didn't want to look at again, like some of the that are just redundant. Like you don't need another one of that class, but
I did, like Varian went away really fast.
yeah, that's a good example. But
Sumia.
I see.
Well, I mean, yeah, I had Cordelia, so I didn't really need some.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, but at the end of the day, I'm pretty curious about the characters that I don't use. So, but good question though. All right. Final question.
Oh boy.
What's your name?
Steve. So
Steve.
What's
the question?
Which do you find, I guess, either more easy or like broken at the end of the day? The bonus EXP in Path of Radiance, or in Three Houses now, just being able to choose which skill you're leveling?
Yeah. So, oh boy. So I finished Radiant Dawn. You've played more of Three Houses, but I would think subjectively, because I haven't interacted with that too much in Three Houses, that picking which stat you want to increase is way more busted. Because random stat growth, even if you have bonus EXP, is still like a kind of unfair mechanic. But I dumped a ton of extra XP into hard to like get into this max promotion and just sweep that whole game. But if you could like min-max characters in a Fire Emblem game, that's busted. So
There's still the random element on like speed and stuff like that as well. And those are the ones that people need to recruit. So those are the ones that are random, and those you need to have to recruit people.
Right.
And that's where it gets mad because I can't control that.
You recruited somebody that was garbage because they didn't have good stats. But but to me, the idea of being able to min-max characters is like busted.
Can I answer this question?
We're like right at the edge, so I gotta give up prizes.
The Three Houses one is really busted because the thing where you got.
All right, thank you guys so much for your questions. Time for prizes.
You guys have fun. I'm gonna set my table up.
Okay. So, and if you have one of these games already, then you can re-roll. Like I won't be upset if you want to pass it off to somebody else. So for the first copy of Bravely Second and Lair,
1 out of 3.
we have Dimitri. Yay! Well deserved, sir. You coming to the photo shoot later?
I am.
I'll see you tomorrow. All right. For the copy of Radiant Historia Perfect Chronology, which is a fantastic game I hope you enjoy, we have Caroline. There we are. I hope you enjoy.
Is it too late to enter?
Yes. For the second copy of Bravely Second and Lair, how many times are we going to say that today? We have
At least one more time.
Tommy. You want to re-roll then? Okay. For the second copy of Van Lair, we have. Did I take Dimitri out? I didn't take it out. Ash.
Good boy.
Thank you very much. I hope you enjoy.
Thank you.
For the copy of Dragon Quest VII, we have Brendan. Is there a Brendan? Hey.
I like your hat, by the way.
Enjoy. It is still sealed. For the third copy of Bravely Second, we have. This is random, I promise. Lucas.
I guess fate decided.
It did. And now finally not finally, because we still have the art book. For the copy of Dragon Quest VIII, we have William. I think the first one.
Awesome. Thank you
There we are. Enjoy. And now finally, for the Fire Emblem Awakening art book and cosplay guide, we have.
Yeah.
Try to make it as random as possible. We have fingers. Lydia.
You really wanted that too. I saw your face when we saw it.
There we go.
I'm so glad.
Well deserved. Thank you guys so much for coming. I really appreciate it. Hey, photo shoot is tomorrow at 4 o'clock. If you meet us in the lobby, we'll go outside together and take photos of all the wonderful Fire Emblem cosplayers.
Yes, and please ask me ship questions.
Be there and be square. Be square.
Oh yeah, all of it. So I literally just hooked up a lightning cable to it, or a Thunderbolt cable, and it recorded everything. It was like I never lost a thing.
As someone who started with
Yeah, so like I said, playing, I don't play video games, so my playing like I said, playing genealogy right now, like
I know.
You know, we got stuff to do. And I own a physical copy of all of them except for Gracia and
When he's just like standing there with the camera, he doesn't want to talk to you.
I just want to say something to them.
On one hand, I'm a little sad.
And so, like, I think it's kind of the same thing I feel like SMT and Persona, where it's like there's some things that are just quality of life improvements that we need. And that there's some things that are true about classic games that
And I talked to Eric and
I think random stat growth is kind of like the fact that I had to do a hard reset in several of the classic games because I just got a bad stat, and that's, to me that's not okay. But
When you finish Golden Deer, you will be sad about Felix. When you finish Golden
I
Deer.
already kind of know like not to separate Felix and Sylvain at any cost.
Yeah, but also don't separate him from Dimitri. Don't separate him from Dimitri, and you've already done that. So yeah.
I'm guessing their ending is really good.
It's no.
Literally, in all his rounds, like all his innings, the ones that are the best for him are the ones that
Yeah. Felix is best in Blue Lions, and he's sad anywhere else.
Yeah.
He just he's a sad boy.
Because he didn't know how to handle his feelings.
I can see that.
Oh.
It's a lot more.
Do we have Hey, does anybody want the Facebook or Discord info?
Oh, yes. Please join us.
Let's go outside and I'll provide that. Yeah.
I also want a
God, yes. So you know what I would have?